I never thought the woman who called herself my stepmom would try to kill me just to get my father's fortune. My name is Serena Whitmore, and my father, Robert Whitmore, had always been my hero. When he passed away, he left behind multi-billion-dollar assets, and suddenly everything changed. Victoria Blake, my stepmom, who I had always sensed was cold and calculating, became obsessed with the inheritance. Her smile never reached her eyes, and the way she talked about taking care of things made my stomach churn. At first, I tried to ignore it. I thought maybe I was imagining her intentions, but the small things she did made it clear she had other plans. She would manipulate the house staff, plant doubts about me, and subtly turn my father's friends against me. Every meeting about the estate felt like walking on thin ice, and her presence alone made me feel unsafe. I could see how she enjoyed the power she thought she could have over me. Then came the night I'll never forget. Victoria invited me to meet her on a bridge under the pretense of discussing some family documents. I wanted to believe she just wanted to talk, but something in her eyes told me otherwise. Before I could react, she pushed me, and I fell into the river below. I thought I was going to die. The cold water shocked me, and I fought to stay afloat. Somehow, I survived, barely conscious, but the betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound. I realized then that Victoria's greed had no limits. During my recovery, Dr. Elias Monroe cared for me, helping me heal physically, but the emotional scars were harder to mend. Lying in that hospital bed, I remembered all the times Victoria had smiled at me falsely, all the subtle ways she tried to control everything my father had built. I understood that I couldn't just run from this. I needed to fight, but not recklessly. I had to be smart. I started quietly gathering information, finding proof of her schemes. I discovered how she planned to alter the will, take over the estate, and even silence anyone who could expose her. Marvin Holt, a lawyer who had been a trusted friend of my father, and Clara Dawson, a family friend, helped me organize evidence carefully. Every secret she thought was hidden was slowly coming to light. Victoria's arrogance grew as she believed I was gone, and she began making mistakes. Her greed blinded her. I stayed patient, waiting for the perfect moment to expose her. When I finally confronted her, I had everything I needed. She couldn't deny it. The betrayal, the threats, the attempt on my life, it was all on record. In the end, justice was served. I inherited my father's estate, and Victoria faced the consequences of her actions. The pain of betrayal was heavy, but surviving it made me stronger. I learned that courage and patience could overcome even the most heartless people. I also realized that the true measure of strength is rising after someone tries to destroy you. From the moment Victoria became part of our family, things felt off. She never tried to hide her dislike for me. Small actions and words made it clear she didn't want me around. She would roll her eyes at my suggestions, sigh loudly whenever I spoke, and make little remarks that made me doubt myself. Even when my father praised me or asked for my opinion, she would quietly whisper doubts to him later, making it seem like I was untrustworthy or careless. Victoria had a way of controlling the people around her without them even noticing. She would charm the house staff, planting little seeds of doubt about me. I noticed how they started avoiding me, whispering behind my back, or suddenly acting as if my opinions didn't matter. The friends and business associates who once respected me seemed to hesitate around her influence. It was as if Victoria had a silent power in the house that no one could see clearly, but I could feel it every day. Even my father, who had always been loving and protective, seemed to fall into her subtle trap. I could see him worrying about her concerns, not realizing they were mostly lies or exaggerations. He would question if I was ready to handle parts of the family business, and sometimes, I felt him doubting me in ways he never had before. It hurt to see him so confused, especially because I knew the truth but couldn't yet prove it. Every day at home became a test of patience. Victoria would smile at me, but the smile never reached her eyes. She would make comments about my choices, my habits, even the way I dressed, making me feel like I didn't belong. She loved to highlight her superior ideas in front of my father, making me feel small without saying anything cruel outright. I started noticing the pattern. Whenever she made me feel weak, she seemed stronger in comparison, and my father, trying to stay neutral, often missed the signs of manipulation. It wasn't just me she targeted. Anyone who supported me felt her pressure. Friends and relatives who tried to defend me suddenly found reasons to step back, either out of fear or because Victoria cleverly convinced them it was in everyone's best interest. I realized she wasn't just jealous of me. She wanted control over the whole family, and I was the only obstacle in her way. Living with her became a daily struggle between pretending everything was normal and trying to protect myself from her constant undermining. I had to be careful with my words, careful with my actions, and always aware of her subtle tactics. Every time my father looked at me with worry, I felt a mix of sadness and frustration, knowing he loved me but couldn't see the storm Victoria had brought into our lives. Despite all this, I tried to stay strong. I reminded myself that her power over the household was temporary, and that one day, I would find a way to stand up for myself. The jealousy, the whispers, the manipulations, they were all cracks in her armor. And deep down, I knew I had the strength to survive her schemes and prove my worth. Victoria called me one evening, saying she wanted to have a final talk about the family matters on a quiet bridge just outside the city. I felt uneasy, a strange knot forming in my stomach, but I tried to ignore it. Part of me wanted to trust her, thinking maybe she just wanted to settle things peacefully. After all, my father had always believed she was sincere, and I had wanted to believe it too. The night was cold, and the bridge was nearly empty. The wind carried a sharp chill that made me shiver. Victoria met me with her usual calm smile, but there was something in her eyes that I couldn't read. She spoke softly, pretending to care about the estate, but her words didn't match the tension I felt growing inside me. Every step I took closer to the center of the bridge made my heart beat faster. I tried to keep the conversation casual, asking her questions and hoping to see some trace of the woman I had once thought I could trust. But with every answer, I felt a subtle push against me, not physically yet, but a pressure in the way she spoke. I realized too late that I had been walking into a trap. Suddenly, she lunged. I barely had time to react as she shoved me hard. My body went over the edge of the bridge, and for a moment, everything felt like slow motion. The cold air rushed past me, my arms flailing as I fell toward the dark water below. Panic consumed me, and I thought about how close I had come to never seeing the world again. The river hit me with a shocking force, dragging me under. I struggled to keep my head above water, gasping for air, my body weak from the sudden impact. Pain shot through my arms and legs, and I felt bruises forming almost instantly. But somehow my survival instinct took over. I kicked, clawed, and fought the river's pull until finally, I managed to reach the riverbank, collapsing on the wet grass, shivering and barely able to move. As I lay there, soaked and battered, anger and disbelief overwhelmed me. Victoria had tried to kill me, and she had done it so coldly, pretending it was just a final talk. The betrayal cut deeper than the bruises on my body. I realized that this was not just about money or power. It was about her wanting to erase me entirely. Even through the pain, a fire started inside me. I couldn't let her get away with this. I knew I would survive, and when I did, I would make sure she paid for what she had tried to do. The memory of that night stayed with me, a constant reminder of how far people could go for greed, and how careful I needed to be. It was terrifying, but it also awakened something in me, something determined and unyielding. That night marked the beginning of a new chapter. I was hurt, yes, but I was alive. And I knew that surviving Victoria's betrayal was only the first step toward taking back control and making her face the consequences of her actions. After the fall, I woke up in a small, quiet hospital room, my body aching in ways I had never felt before. Every movement reminded me of how close I had come to death. Dr. Elias Monroe, the physician assigned to me, was calm and kind. He didn't just treat my bruises and broken bones. He checked on me like he genuinely cared, explaining every procedure and encouraging me to keep fighting through the pain. His presence made the hospital feel less like a prison and more like a place to regain my strength. Lying in that bed, I had a lot of time to think. The memory of Victoria's betrayal haunted me. I kept replaying the moment she pushed me, the coldness in her eyes, and the way she had pretended to care about the family. I realized then that I had been naive. My father had loved her, trusted her, and maybe even believed she was good. But I had seen her for what she really was, greedy, manipulative, and dangerous. At the same time, grief for my father washed over me. Losing him had been hard enough, but knowing that Victoria had tried to take everything from him and from me made the pain sharper. I thought about the life we had built together, the lessons he had taught me, and the moments that now felt stolen by her betrayal. Tears came easily, but beneath them was a growing anger, a fire that refused to be extinguished. Fear also lingered in the back of my mind. If Victoria had tried to kill me once, who knew what she might do next? I worried for the remaining family members, for anyone who might stand in her way, and for the estate that was still at risk. It was a mix of dread and determination that made my heart race. I knew I had to be careful, but I also knew I couldn't run forever. Dr. Monroe noticed my restlessness and talked to me about focusing on recovery first. He reminded me that strength comes in stages, healing the body, then the mind, then planning the next steps. Listening to him, I realized that I was stronger than I had believed. The near-death experience had shaken me, yes, but it had also opened my eyes. I wasn't just a victim, I was a survivor. Slowly, as my body began to heal, my mind sharpened. I promised myself that I would not let Victoria win. She had underestimated me, and that mistake would be her downfall. Every day of recovery, I imagined taking back what was rightfully mine and exposing her for the person she truly was. The anger, grief, and fear all became fuel, pushing me toward a path I knew I had to follow. By the time I could stand on my own again, I wasn't just recovering physically. I was readying myself for the fight ahead. Victoria had tried to destroy me, but I was alive, and I had something she could never take, my resolve. The memory of that night, the betrayal, and my father's love became my guide. I would survive, and when the time came, I would make sure justice was served. Once I was back on my feet, I knew I couldn't leave things to chance. I had to find out exactly what Victoria was planning. Every instinct told me she wasn't finished with her schemes, and I needed proof before she could do more harm. I started looking into her actions quietly, careful not to let her suspect I was awake and aware. It didn't take long before I found clues that made my blood run cold. Hidden among old files and papers, I discovered documents showing her real intentions. Victoria had been planning to manipulate the will so she could control all of my father's assets. She had written notes about how to convince others that I wasn't fit to inherit and even how to remove anyone who might get in her way. Some of the papers hinted at threats to the household staff, making it clear that anyone who spoke up could be in danger. I felt a mix of fear and anger. She had been ready to go to any lengths, even hurting innocent people, just to get what she wanted. The shock hit me hard. I had thought she was just greedy, but now I understood the full scope of her cruelty. This was no longer about money alone. This was about power, control, and eliminating anyone who could stop her. My heart ached for the staff who had been loyal to me and my father. I realized that Victoria had spent years planning everything quietly, manipulating people without leaving obvious signs. It was frightening, but it also made me more determined. I couldn't let her succeed. I knew I couldn't do this alone. I needed people I could trust, who would help me gather evidence and take action without alerting her. That's when I reached out to Marvin Holt, a lawyer who had worked with my father for years. Marvin was smart, discreet, and fiercely loyal to anyone he believed in. He understood the seriousness of the situation immediately and promised to help me organize the evidence and plan the next steps carefully. I also turned to Clara Dawson, a family friend who had always supported me. Clara had connections in the household and knew details about Victoria that I didn't. She helped me find more documents and quietly speak with staff who had been too afraid to talk before. With their help, I was able to start piecing together the full picture of Victoria's plans. As the evidence came together, my fear turned into resolve. I could see clearly now how far Victoria was willing to go, and it only made me stronger. Every document, every hidden note, every whispered confession from the staff added to the proof I needed to protect myself and my father's legacy. I promised myself that I wouldn't let her get away with any of it. The more I learned, the more I felt ready to take back control and make sure Victoria faced the consequences of her actions. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was preparing to fight, and I knew I had the allies and the proof to make sure justice was served. As I gathered more evidence, memories I had pushed aside started coming back to me. I remembered how Victoria had quietly shifted the balance in our family over the years. She would drop small hints to my father, questioning my decisions or suggesting I wasn't ready to handle responsibilities. At first, it seemed harmless, just little comments here and there. But looking back now, I could see the pattern. She had a way of twisting the truth. If I made a simple mistake, she would exaggerate it to my father, making him doubt me. If I succeeded at something, she would downplay it, whispering that I had only been lucky. She planted seeds of doubt slowly, carefully, so that my father began to second-guess me without even realizing why. It was subtle, almost invisible, but it worked. Over time, I noticed his hesitation, the way he would pause before trusting me with important matters, and the way his confidence in me seemed to falter. The betrayal cut deeper when I realized how much she had manipulated him emotionally. He had always been loving and protective, but Victoria had found ways to twist his trust and loyalty. She made it seem as though I was a threat to the family's stability, while presenting herself as the only responsible one. I felt a mixture of anger and sorrow thinking about how my father had been so blind to her schemes. The hardest part was accepting the truth about her intentions. This was the woman I had tried to trust, the person I had thought could be a family ally. She had wanted me dead, and she had been working quietly for years to undermine me emotionally, to make me feel weak and unworthy. The depth of her deception left me heartbroken. I had given her chances, moments of trust, and she had betrayed me at every turn. At the same time, my heartbreak turned into rage. The more I thought about how carefully she had manipulated every situation, the more I felt determined to fight back. Every cruel whisper, every false accusation, every subtle betrayal fueled my anger and my desire for justice. I realized that my revenge was not just about money or power. It was about righting the wrongs done to me and exposing her for the person she truly was. I remembered nights when I had tried to talk to my father about feeling uneasy, but Victoria would always be there, quietly changing the conversation, making me doubt myself. Now, I understood that all of it had been part of her plan. She wanted to isolate me, weaken me, and make it easier to take everything for herself. Those memories, painful as they were, strengthened my resolve. I could see clearly now that Victoria's manipulation had been intentional and long-term. It wasn't just greed, it was cruelty and calculated betrayal. Feeling the mix of heartbreak and rage, I knew my fight against her wasn't just justified, it was necessary. I would not let her win. I would take back control and make sure she faced the consequences of every lie, every manipulation, and every attempt to destroy me. Once I was fully recovered, I knew I had to act carefully. I couldn't rush or make mistakes, because Victoria was dangerous and clever. Every move I made had to be planned. I started by thinking through everything I had learned about her actions, her weaknesses, and the people around her. I realized that patience and intelligence would be my strongest tools. I began quietly forming alliances. Some of the house staff had always been loyal to me, but were too afraid to speak up. I reached out to them slowly, listening to their concerns and gaining their trust. They provided small but important details about Victoria's schemes, things she thought she had hidden. Each bit of information helped me understand her plan better and gave me an advantage I could use later. Next, I connected with financial experts who could help me take control of my father's assets. I made sure to be discreet, contacting people I could trust completely. These experts helped me review accounts, investments, and documents that Victoria had tried to manipulate. I began slowly putting together a strategy to regain control without alerting her. Every action was subtle, nothing that would raise suspicion, but it moved me closer to my goal. I also started practicing self-restraint. It would have been easy to confront Victoria immediately or make my anger visible, but I knew that showing emotion could give her the upper hand. Instead, I focused on being careful, strategic, and calculated. I studied her routines, her habits, and the ways she tried to control others. I learned where she was weak, and I planned how to use that information when the time was right. Every day, I reviewed my plans, double-checked my evidence, and made small adjustments. I reminded myself that this wasn't just about revenge. It was about protecting my father's legacy and making sure Victoria could not harm anyone else. I stayed alert, making sure every step I took brought me closer to reclaiming what was mine. Even the smallest victories mattered. A staff member giving me a crucial piece of information, or a financial expert confirming irregularities in the estate, was a step forward. Slowly, quietly, I was taking back control, building a network of allies and resources around me. Victoria remained unaware, thinking I was still weak and recovering, but in truth, I was becoming stronger and more prepared each day. By the time I was ready to act openly, I had a clear plan, the right people on my side, and the proof I needed to expose her. My strategy was not about rushing or taking risks. It was about using patience, intelligence, and careful observation to make sure I couldn't fail. I realized that staying calm and thinking ahead made me more powerful than Victoria's manipulations. This careful planning gave me confidence. I knew I could win because I had everything lined up: loyal allies, strong evidence, and a clear strategy. Victoria might have tried to destroy me, but I was ready to take back control, and this time, nothing would stop me. Victoria's confidence grew every day, and she believed I was no longer a threat. She acted as if I had disappeared completely, as if the accident had finished me off. This overconfidence made her careless. She began making risky financial decisions, signing deals without thinking them through, and ignoring advice from people who had always helped my father manage the estate wisely. Her greed became more obvious with each passing day. She started taking money from investments, selling properties hastily, and making promises she couldn't keep. Investors began noticing her mistakes, and some started pulling out. Victoria didn't seem to care about the warnings. She thought she could charm or intimidate anyone who questioned her decisions. Her arrogance blinded her to the fact that she was exposing herself to failure. At the same time, she alienated the staff. Those who had once quietly supported me began to feel her cruelty more intensely. She berated them over small mistakes, spread lies to turn them against each other, and made it clear that loyalty to anyone other than her would not be tolerated. People who had stayed in the household out of fear or respect for my father began to grow uncomfortable. Victoria didn't notice, too wrapped up in her belief that she was in full control. I watched everything quietly, careful not to let her know I was still paying attention. Every misstep, every careless decision, and every instance of her arrogance became part of the plan I had been building. I knew that sooner or later, her mistakes would cause problems she couldn't fix. By letting her reveal her own greed and cruelty, I could expose her completely without risking myself. It was hard to stay calm at times, seeing someone so dangerous make such obvious errors. But I reminded myself that patience was key. Victoria's actions were helping me, giving me evidence and witnesses that would strengthen my case against her. I could see how her overconfidence made her predictable, and I began thinking about how to use that to my advantage. Her arrogance also gave me insight into her personality. She wasn't just greedy, she was reckless when she felt untouchable. She believed power and money were all she needed, and she had no idea that the people around her, including loyal staff and family friends, could turn against her. Each mistake she made her weaker, even though she didn't realize it. As I observed quietly, I felt a mixture of satisfaction and determination. Victoria was digging her own hole, and I had the tools to ensure she couldn't climb out. Everything she did was leading to a moment where her true nature would be revealed for everyone to see. I knew the time was approaching when I could finally confront her, using her arrogance and carelessness against her. Her overconfidence was my advantage. By watching her make mistakes, alienate allies, and show her true colors, I was preparing to strike in a way that would ensure justice and protect my father's legacy. Victoria thought she was untouchable, but soon, everything she had worked for would crumble because of her own actions. The day finally came when I was ready to confront Victoria. I had gathered all the evidence I needed. Emails she had sent plotting against me, notes about her attempts to manipulate the will, testimonies from staff who had been threatened, and financial records showing her reckless actions. Everything was organized and undeniable. I knew there was no way she could twist the truth this time. I invited her to a meeting under the pretense of discussing the estate. When she arrived, I could see the first flicker of doubt in her eyes. I remained calm, letting her sense that I was in control. I laid out everything I had discovered, piece by piece, showing her plans, her lies, and her attempts to harm me. Each document, each testimony, each record hit her like a hammer. At first, Victoria tried to manipulate the situation, denying her actions and blaming me for misunderstanding her. She raised her voice, tried to charm and intimidate the staff who had been loyal to me, and even attempted to cast doubt on the evidence. But it was useless. The proof was solid, undeniable, and clear. The staff, the lawyers, and the witnesses all supported what I presented. I could see panic growing in her eyes. Her carefully constructed image of power and control was crumbling in front of her. For the first time, she looked small and weak. Every lie she had told, every plan she had made to remove me from the picture, was exposed. I stayed composed, not letting my emotions take over, even though inside I felt a rush of satisfaction. Soon the legal authorities were involved. They reviewed the documents and testimonies and quickly took action to protect the estate. Victoria's access to any of the assets was immediately revoked, and she faced consequences for her attempts to manipulate the will and harm me. Her reputation, which she had worked so hard to build, collapsed in an instant. Everyone who had once respected her now saw her for what she truly was. Seeing her reaction, I felt a mix of relief and triumph. The fear, the anger, and the heartbreak I had carried for so long finally had a resolution. This was more than just winning the battle over money. It was justice for the betrayal, the attempted murder, and the years of manipulation. I realized that staying patient, thinking carefully, and gathering the right evidence had made the difference. I didn't need to act recklessly or give in to anger. The truth was enough to win. Victoria had underestimated me at every step, and that mistake had cost her everything. As the meeting ended, I felt a deep sense of closure. I had survived her betrayal, exposed her cruelty, and protected my father's legacy. The weight that had pressed on me for so long finally lifted. This moment wasn't just a victory. It was a statement that justice, patience, and determination could overcome even the most dangerous betrayals. After everything was over, I finally inherited my father's estate. It was more than just money or property. It was his life's work, his legacy, and I felt honored to take responsibility for it. I wanted to make sure everything he had built would continue to reflect the values he had taught me: honesty, hard work, and care for those around him. Slowly, I reconnected with family members and friends who had always been loyal, those who had quietly supported me through Victoria's schemes. Rebuilding these relationships reminded me how important trust and loyalty are, and how fragile they can be when someone manipulative is involved. I realized I had been too trusting at times, but I also knew that careful vigilance could protect what mattered most. Life began to feel lighter, though the memories of betrayal never fully left me. I thought often about Victoria and how her greed and cruelty had almost destroyed me. Yet surviving her and reclaiming what was mine made me stronger. I learned that pain and hardship could shape you into someone wiser and more resilient if you refused to give in to fear. Each challenge I faced had taught me patience, strategy, and how to read people more clearly. I also found peace in knowing that justice had been served. Victoria's actions had been exposed, and she could no longer harm anyone else. Seeing her face the consequences of her choices reminded me that betrayal has limits when met with courage and persistence. It was a relief to know that I could finally move forward without fear, with my father's memory guiding my decisions. Looking back, I understood that life had tested me in ways I never expected. The pain of losing my father, combined with the shock of betrayal, had been overwhelming, but it had also given me clarity. I knew now that inner strength and careful planning could overcome even the worst situations. I had survived, and I had emerged not only victorious but wiser. As I settled into this new chapter, I felt empowered. I knew that life could be unpredictable and that people might try to take advantage of your trust, but I also knew I had the ability to protect myself and those I cared about. The experience taught me that resilience is built through hardship and that justice is worth pursuing, no matter how difficult the path. In the end, I was stronger, smarter, and more confident than I had ever been. My father's legacy was safe, my loyal friends and family were by my side, and I had learned lessons that would guide me for the rest of my life. Betrayal had tried to break me, but it had only made me unstoppable.